Hello, South by Southwest and Public House. How are you today? Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Emily Best. I'm the founder and CEO of Seed and Spark. I am also a godmother at a tech justice nonprofit called Motherboard. And we help create the conditions, the social conditions for building healthy technology and collective good futures. I don't know if I've ever been this excited about hosting a panel ever, in part because of the admiration I feel for the women on stage, in part because of the importance of the work that they're doing, and in part because I really love what Public House is doing, what it stands for, and why we're all here today. But it all took us a little longer to get here than we anticipated. And I late-breakingly added Ashley to the panel after watching my NDA. So there's no chair for me today. So I'm going to go ahead and sit on the corner of the stage. Indie filmmaking, y'all. I would like us all to do something really quickly together, and I'm going to ask you to participate in this with me. Can everybody please take a deep breath? Check in with your body from head to toe. Where are you feeling? Mine's right here. Where do you hold tension? How are you showing up today? And how might you represent that as green, yellow, or red? We also have we added a new one recently called black, which is dissociating but happy to be here. And I think sometimes that's what's required to show up in spaces like this, but I just want to invite us to show up as humans together for this conversation today, because that's fundamentally what storytelling is. It's an extremely human act. We're not the only ones who do it. Bees do it. Birds do it. Bees do it. Whales do it. We know for sure. But it is really fundamentally human, the way that we tell stories. And even though we're going to have a conversation about infrastructure, I would like us to approach this as uniquely human. So would you each mind just giving us your own red, yellow, green this morning? How are you?
Ooh, I'm a green. Yeah, bright green.
Great.
Yeah, I'm probably like a pale green.
We accept Grello, lime, chartreuse. It's a spectrum.
I was trying to think of the proper combination, but pale green feels nice.
Great. And Christy?
I'll go, yes, green, happy to be here, but a little Grello, because I got a little stressed because we were running to be here. I missed the address, and then we got stuck behind Kevin Bacon for like 10 minutes.
Kevin and Kira, love you so much. You could have walked up the stairs faster. That would have
We
really
were stressed
helped
a little
us
bit.
out.
We're like, don't run over Kevin Bacon, don't run over Kevin Bacon.
And we were in such a hurry that their bodyguard was unhappy with us. We almost got checked by a very large human, speaking of humans. So I'd like to start just by giving you some context for this panel. We're going to talk about storytelling infrastructure. And what I mean when I say that is what are the social tools and technologies, the digital tools and technologies, maybe the physical tools and technologies that we use for storytelling, and where are we today vis-a-vis our ability to really tell the truth? And I would say showing up as you are in a space is one version of telling the truth. And sometimes that's just a social technology of somebody being like, no, I mean it. How are you? So you can be like, I don't know, the world is really tough. And this panel is going to explore kind of the breadth of that. We are centering this on an incredible fucking film. Sorry, South by can bleep me later. And I'm sorry, no, your daughter's there. Never mind, I'll stop swearing. I'm sorry, I apologize. An incredible film called My NDA, which tells the story of 3 people who were brave enough to blow the whistle in spite of really ironclad contracts saying they could not tell their own stories. And so we really want to talk about what's broken, what's fixable, what the opportunities are, and how we go from the seed of truth inside to possibly broad sweeping policy and infrastructure change. And we're going to do that in 55 minutes and 50 seconds. So I'd like to start, if each of you could just introduce yourselves, the work you're doing now, and the seed of truth that sits within you in this moment.
Wow, that's a lot. I will try. My name is Ifomo Zoma. I'm a participant in My NDA, and also I changed the law in California after breaking my own NDA, reformed non-disclosure agreement and non-disparagement agreement, use in employment and housing contexts for all 40 million people in the state. That was also done in Washington State. And yeah, I'm just really happy to have the story told in this way because it wasn't my inclination to do so. My best friend, Hannah, after I told her I was planning on breaking my NDA, thought it was the right thing to do to document it, even though 6 years ago we had no idea it would turn into this film.
Hi, everyone. I'm Hannah. I'm a filmmaker. I'm a producer on my NDA. I work both in the narrative and documentary spaces and any new spaces that I find my way into, because what I'm interested in is people, what happens to them, what they think about, how they become themselves, and how much of a process that is at every stage. It's an incredible honor to be on this stage and to be in this conversation and in a room that's quite large but feels really intimate because of the way that you have set the table for this discussion. Yeah, I think that's my due north. That's enough for now.
My name is Ashley Costal. I am a participant in the film My NDA. I'm here because I was sexually assaulted by a colleague 7 years ago. I immediately started making video diaries of myself because that experience was playing out a lot differently than as a woman following the process I envisioned it doing so. I started making these recordings of myself with no idea how they would ever, if they would ever get shown, but it felt really necessary for me to really document everything, what was happening, even my emotions, in order to try to figure out how I can prevent this from happening to the next person. I have been a part of an anonymous source and publicly broken my NDA now in 8 different publications, and all of that is tracked throughout the film My NDA, but I'm here because I want to ensure that what I went through doesn't happen to the next person in the same way.
Hi, my name is Christy Marchese. I'm the founder and CEO of Kinema, and we're a film distribution platform that supports community screenings globally and direct-to-audience streaming. I'm kind of I'll go to the seat of truth. Everything we want to do is provide an opportunity for filmmakers and creators to get their film seen and to build a sustainable career. And at a time where the bigger platforms are merging and are afraid to take on certain stories, we really want to exist to support and uplift the stories that need to be told so they aren't getting silenced and audiences can see them.
Thank you so much. So you see why I'm excited right now, right? Yes. I think, Ashley, if it's okay, I'd like to start with you because I know you don't necessarily identify as a storyteller, but you started telling a story that was very personal to you. Can you talk about what it was like to become a storyteller? And like, what were the tools you were using? And what were you discovering along the way?
So I guess the obvious thing was I never asked for this. That a storyteller was nothing that I ever set out to be. And to call myself that now, this is just me sharing my truth. It's a part of me. I was told from the very beginning to document everything as I was going through this process, and words just I couldn't express what was happening well enough that way. And I'm a very private person. I don't have social media, would have never thought that I would pull my camera out. But I didn't know what to write, and the second I turned it on, I was able to articulate what was happening. I was able to kind of zoom out almost and say, this is what I was expecting to happen, this is how it's happening, and I just felt that I needed to do this for some reason. I wish I knew why I felt the need to do this. And I even told my therapist at the time, I was like, there's no way that I would ever share these, for many reasons, unless I had the opportunity to scream at the top of a mountain and I had a platform that actually could make impact. So I didn't have a goal in mind of what was going to come, and through me reaching out to journalists, just weirdly, I happened to go on Business Insider one day, and they had a ad that was like, got a tech NDA, we want to hear from you. And I was like, no shit. Right after I had signed the first of my 3 NDAs, this popped up. reached out to that journalist, and it started this journey for me that actually opened a door to meeting Miriam and Julie and this team. And I was then presented with an opportunity at a platform that I didn't even think was attainable at the time. But throughout all of this, I met so many women. I met so many people that weren't able to speak out for various reasons, whether it's they wanted to feed their child, there's so many situational things that I learned that prevent women from being able to speak, but for some reason, none of those were where I was. So I felt this responsibility, and like, if I could do it, I could do it for us. And I stand with everybody before me who couldn't speak out, and I just, for some reason, found myself in the right place at the right time, and I feel like I'm doing the right thing. And I had videos of myself that shocked I made, but I'm really glad I did, because I think it's a very important message to tell, and I think sharing the emotion is the part that makes everybody else really uncomfortable, but that's the part that needs to be shown. And I was not prepared to go through what I went through. Nobody else can be unless people like me do this, unfortunately. So I'm not a storyteller, but I'm happy to share the stories of everybody in hopes of bringing change.
Thank you so much. So Ashley wasn't originally scheduled to be part of this panel, and then I watched the film, and I watched her talk about the importance of a platform for stories like this, and I was like, well, we're going to have a literal platform, like the one I'm sitting on, in a few days, and I feel like what's interesting is that great stories demand a platform, and then we can build to meet them, and I find that to be just such an inspiring piece of this. So Hannah, I want to turn to you, because you started as a storyteller, and you created a platform for this story with a reluctant participant, but for the context, for those of you who haven't seen the film, there's a really amazing scene that unfolds early on in the film where Ifeoma is literally sitting in her kitchen deciding that she might publicly break her NDA, and we watch it happen. And it's like one of those things in documentary, I just got chills again. It's one of those things in documentary, like you never get to see that. Like you're always interviewing somebody about it later. So can you talk to me about like what happened in that space? What had to be true for you to recognize what was happening and turn your camera on?
There's a little bit of backstory that I think is helpful, which is that I call Ifeoma Ify. Not everyone gets to. But Ify and I went to high school together. We went to boarding school together, so we've known each other since we were 14. She's extremely close with my whole family. This story requires a rewind to early June of 2020, height of the pandemic, pre-vaccine. I knew that my best friend, who had been working in the tech space since we graduated from college, in really high-profile positions at Facebook and Google, and then at Pinterest, was really suffering, that very, very upsetting things had happened in her workplace that she couldn't talk about, couldn't share in, and I didn't recognize this person, and she was really isolated. So my mother and I set off from New Haven, Connecticut, to get to Ify in Santa Fe, just to be around her and to just be in the room, basically, in case she wanted to talk, which of course she didn't. And we, this was like PPE, pre-vaccine, really intense time, and it took 3 days to drive. And the night that we were gonna arrive at like 8, she called me and said, just a heads up, Pinterest has posted a black square in solidarity with Black lives. After experiencing a 1.5 years of racial and gender discrimination at this company, it doesn't sit well with me. Your trip's not gonna be very relaxing. I'm thinking of breaking my NDA. We arrived at midnight, cut to the next morning. It was about 7 a.m. in her kitchen, and I knew, because Ify was a kind of a lobbying policy interpersonal expert, that whatever she was about to do was gonna cause a big splash. She was gonna put her enormous skill set to practice in her breaking of her NDA, and the filmmaker and me had no idea what was gonna come of this, but I knew my friend, so I knew it would be something, and I said, do you want me to film it? And she said, sorry, Arinma, she said, get the fuck out of my kitchen. And I said, okay. And about 30 seconds later, she said, you can come back and you can film everything. And that was the beginning. The kind of the more emotional context for me is that I was very aware of the fact that this was going to need to be on her terms at the same time that I had a skill set that I thought could be useful in some way. So it was this immediate balancing act of how do I, as a human person, care for my friend, and also think about what the possibility of this could be without knowing what the end goal was, I think. So, I mean, on a practical level, where can the camera be so it's not annoying to her or the least amount of annoying? I don't know that I always struck that balance, as you can see. And, you know, also how do I get out of the way and have conversations later about what this is? And it was possible for me to feel like it was an ethical process, because if at any moment she said, you know what, no, you know, I'm like pulling the plug, and I'm sure we'll get into this, there were a lot of safeguards for the people we were working with, you know, and I want to shout out my amazing co-directors, Julianne Dressner and Miriam Shore, and our producing partner, Elizabeth Woodward, who, you know, together we made this film with, you know, other people besides these two, but this amazing team. And it was a really unusual filmmaking process for the reason of everyone who's in this movie, if they decide they don't want to be, we stop, you know, which is not the infrastructure that we have in place for making things, because it gives power not to the decision makers, you know, on the kind of film side of things.
Oh yeah, just real quick on that. What normally would you ask people to sign at the beginning of starting to film if you were going to embark on a documentary and raise money for it?
I mean, an appearance release, and that appearance release would probably have a standard, nobody reads it, NDA right in there, a confidentiality agreement. And actually, and we can talk about this, I don't want to take up too much time at the jump, but, you know, even the ones that we got from lawyers had those in them. So it was this like incredible learning curve process with the lawyers that wanted us to make this movie and wanted us to be protected, of figuring out how to be legally secure and also be ethical in the process of including stories, you know, by people who we were trying to create a platform for, but it was not our story, you know, it was theirs. So
I'm just going to do this for everyone's benefit in case you're not familiar. How many of you are filmmakers or in the media space? Just a few of you, right? So I'm gonna give the rest of you some context, because my dad actually sent this to me because his girlfriend's son, who is 17, was in a music video, and she had a Guardian media release, and he sent it to me, and he was like, "How do you feel about this?" And I gave him some red lines. But this was just really quickly, grant of rights, and this has to be signed in order to get your money. Parent Guardian grants producer, the artist, and their licenses, successors, and assigns the unrestricted, perpetual worldwide right to photograph, record, reproduce, edit, modify, distribute, publicly display, publicly perform, transmit, advertise, promote, and otherwise use the minor's name, likeness, voice, image, and performance as captured in connection with the project in all media now known or later developed. And that is bullet point number 1. And I'm imagining your subjects were like, get the F out of here with that.
yeah, some wouldn't have seen that because we would have had the foresight not to put it in front of them. But there were definitely, I mean, a lot of this process was like figuring out how to do something that, you know, figuring out how to level set when you made a mistake, and like saying, hey, that probably didn't feel right. What could feel better? Can you engage with me in a process around making this in a way that feels good? Because it was our first rodeo in doing something like this for, you know, too. So I would rather name the thing I don't know how to do and get help doing it well than pretend I have the answers and, like, you know, ask for forgiveness way later.
Curiosity. I just want to, so I want to name very specifically that the beginning of that I just read is like the standard boilerplate appearance release copy that, like, sometimes we don't know we're signing when we walk into a space like this where things are being recorded. It's frankly probably what South by made us sign in order to be on this stage. That is infrastructure. That is legal infrastructure, right? And what you're saying is that in order to tell this story about people's individual truths, you had to renegotiate some just really standard media infrastructure. And that's why, like, I think sometimes we don't We forget to talk about these really boring quotidian things like the agreements that you sign, but they are critical infrastructure that can suppress our ability to tell certain stories, and you don't know it until you need it. So, Ifoma, I would love to hear from you as the person on the other side of that. And I know you're a take no shit kind of a gal. Can you talk a little bit about what was your decision making in that moment? Why did Hannah get called back into the kitchen? And what that process was like for you to negotiate?
Well, a little by way of context, my jobs at Google, Facebook, Pinterest were all public facing. I was in public policy roles where a big part of what I did was comms. And so I would be translating really complicated content policy into something that was accessible. But I was also doing that, as an example, I had an interview with Audie Cornish on NPR on the same day that my lawyer was negotiating, well, trying to negotiate me being paid fairly with lawyers at the company who I was on the same team as. The day my demands letter from my lawyer was delivered to our general counsel, I was in the office, and we had an open office space, and my desk faced her desk. So if we were both standing and our computers were down, we would be looking at each other in the face when the FedEx delivery with the demands letter was brought to her. So, but that kind of dissociation that I had to do, I was good at. It was eating me up. I had hives, I was not well, but I was able to do that. And in that moment, I was like, I can do this well. Like, I have a plan for breaking this. I have no idea what Hannah is going to do, but I know that I'm good at my job, she's good at her job, and so I can trust that she is going to tell this story in a way that only she could because she knows me so well. And all I have to do is my job in telling my story, and I feel like that came across really well in the film, and I'm forever grateful for that. If anyone else had asked, it would have been a no, because of the level of dissociation that I had to become a professional at, I was not well, and she saw all of that, and I had to be incredibly vulnerable in a way that I'm not when I'm doing a radio or a paper interview, because all you see is the words, and I got really comfortable with the words. And part of my process of getting comfortable with this film has been looking at myself and seeing and feeling how not good I was. And knowing that, sorry, I don't want to make you cry, that's part of it. That's part of it. And I didn't have to look as put together as I had gotten so used to looking.
Trust is a really important social technology and a really important piece of the infrastructure that allows truth-telling and storytelling to come out. Ashley and Ifoma, can you talk a little bit about, so I understand this because you had already made an unbelievable gesture as a friend of seeing your friend and showing up for her, and so the level of trust is very apparent there. Ashley, as I watched your story unfold, I was like, man, this woman takes risks. I mean, you spoke to so many people that you were meeting for the first time about something that was so, in many ways, dangerous to you. How did you find the resource to trust in the process that you were engaging in?
The process leading up to that, honestly, had broken me so much that I had no trust in the teams that were supposed to help me throughout this process. Did not help me. The police did not help me. HR did not help me. Life insurance, short-term disability did not help me, despite doing all of the things that I was told to do. So it was a total rebuild of myself, and and trust from everybody from the start. And with Matt, the journalist from Business Insider, I felt I didn't trust him, but he's very warm. He's very empathetic. How he spoke to me was not like a lot of journalists have. He took a lot of care in how he spoke to me. He was incredibly patient. I was still incredibly scared of everything at that point. I didn't even want to give him documents right away. Patience at the very beginning with him kind of eased my way into opening the door to kind of, trust wasn't as important. It was like, what choice do I have? If I want the opportunity to have this platform, I just got to go with it. Like, I'm here now, I got to do it. It was an all-in thing for me, and I made that decision very early on, and every woman that I spoke to, every person just empowered me more to do that. So it wasn't so much as like I was looking for trust as much as I felt like that was secondary to what was important for me, the benefit that I could potentially get, the impact I could potentially have. But then meeting Miriam and Julie and team, like, they were some of the most incredible people who I will have in my life forever. It was a hard process. It sucks having a camera in your face, like when you're put together, let alone when you're isolated, alone, in the darkest place one could think of. And it was just, to have these women, it was, I tell them now, I realize that once I met them and they were sitting with me and like I could see their emotions through all of it, it was very validating for me to have these people when I'm being gaslit about, I'm not being believed. I thought I did something wrong, and people were like, no, Ash, you're not crazy. Like, you're right. So it was helpful for that, but I told them that they kind of felt like an umbrella when I was going through the storm. At the beginning, it was like I was just deep in the storm, but I met these people, and I knew that I had the support if I needed it emotionally and others, and that was kind of how that happened.
I love the way that you're talking about this because it helps me recognize something. I'm going to say something I haven't said out loud before, but that I think I deeply believe is that care is a really important part of storytelling infrastructure. And what you're describing are the behaviors of care as opposed to what I think we kind of look like, which is a lot of movies feel very extractive, right? You hear these stories of directors like extracting a performance or fooling their actors, or, most of reality TV is like the producers are actually scheming behind the scenes, whatever. It's very extractive. I'm gonna make you do something. And what I'm hearing is that this was a process of allowing you to be and recognizing what conditions need to be true for you to be your bravest selves. Because that's the thing, I'm gonna cry. That's the thing in this film that I think I walked away from. Go see this movie. Everybody needs to see this movie. You don't fucking forget that it's coming out. You need to write this down, and like whatever time it takes between now and when it is widely available, you need to pay attention and make sure that you go see it. That is my command to you all here. But like I walked away from it, apart from being incredibly angry about the systems that are so encouraged by the bravery that was demonstrated, and I believe that it was the care that was taken in the process that made it possible for that to come through. And the reason I'm trying to make these connections is because we're in a room full of like technologists and social folks, social activists and storytellers, and I think we need to understand that this applies to all of us. The lessons from how something like this comes to be applies to all of us. And now, after all of that, Christy, I'm going to turn to you because you have been building infrastructure for very daring storytelling to make it out into the world and have impact for nigh on 15, I don't mean to age you, sorry, some time now. And I would like you to talk about, you've had such an unbelievable experience. So Christy was the founder of Picture Motion, which was one of the premier impact producing, am I going to say this right?
Impact producing agency. Yeah,
agencies, and has taken some of the most impactful films we've had in the last 15 years out to the communities to actually enact impact. And now you're building Kinema, which is helping films actually get into communities through social distribution, turning third spaces into community media spaces. It's so incredible, but you're driven very much by how do we do things differently? So I'm just curious, as you have, what was your arc of sort of like learning about the challenges that those films faced that has driven you now into a 15-year career helping stories like this come to light?
Yeah, what a setup, thank you. So yeah, I've been, before starting Picture Motion, which I did about for 10 years, I was at Participant Media, which I think people are hopefully familiar with. For a couple of years, one of the bigger kind of impact production companies. So I've always worked, and before that I worked in the nonprofit world doing storytelling, producing YouTube videos, and building communities on MySpace. That's how old I actually am. We used MySpace. And so, yeah, so I've seen the arc of like how storytelling has been supported and now unsupported too. So Participant was an entire company driven, dedicated to supporting those types of stories. And I do say, you guys, to be a storyteller in this space is to take on so much risk, and like you do it so beautifully, and it's an incredible container that you created for the people in your film to be able to share their stories. And at Participant, we would tell these big stories about really important topics, but often we were not able to actually talk about the issues. And so, because institutions can sometimes be held back legally. So for example, we worked on a film called Food Inc., and part of the Food Inc. storyline was the damage that Monsanto was doing. I ran the Facebook page at the time, and we were not allowed to use the word Monsanto. Could not talk about Monsanto because, even though the film was about it, because it put the company at risk and it put the founder at risk, who had, I can talk about this now because the company doesn't exist. So the founder who had made money from eBay and had a lot to lose if he got sued. And so that was kind of the first instance of seeing how, like, even though there's these institutions out there who say they want to do these great things, they're still held back out of fear. And so at Picture Motion, we started that because we wanted to do what we did at Participant Media for films that didn't have that type of infrastructure. So for filmmakers who are going more independent or starting to use more social media to reach audiences and to get them into theaters. And so after doing that for 10 years, we watched how the industry was changing again. There was a big uptick. The streamers were buying. Like, there's competition. They want to win awards, so they're spending money on documentary, and more money is going into that. We're getting new executive producers, and films are selling for $5 or $10 million. And then the competition changed. The streamers realized you can't charge $7 a month for an unlimited library, and they can't keep up with those budgets, and now documentary film isn't serving them in the same way. They only want to do cults and celebrities and sports because that's what is driving the minutes watched on the platforms. And now those platforms are so expensive, they have to start combining, and now we have less buyers. I'm giving like a whole history here, sorry. But so this is where we're at right now. And so along the way, watching this and responding to it and being a practitioner in the impact space, we came up with the concept for Kinema by seeing all these great docs not having the big theatrical releases that we wanted them to have. So we built a system that has a network of community spaces and community organizers who represent spaces or people IRL who want to show these types of screenings. So a film doesn't have to get a theatrical release in 20 markets. They can do 100 one-night showings in a range of markets outside of major cities. And so that's where we kind of come from. And then because the streaming platforms were buying less and less, we added the direct-to-audience streaming option, and we believe in transparency. So we share the audience data. You get paid every week or every day. You have full control over your film. We don't take any rights. And so we're trying to build this type of system that takes in the artists and the storytellers to be a part of the distribution. And I guess I'll stop there.
Two things. Two things that I come away with, and the first is part of our manifesto at Motherboard, which is the Participant Media is a really good example of the kindness of billionaires being a bad plan. Sorry to the room that we're in. All due respect to the endowments and foundations that have made this possible, but we all know that, like, this is, particularly if they're still alive, they can just choose to do something differently, and then the infrastructure evaporates overnight. And I love the way that you told the participant story, because you told a story of institutional risk calculus, which is very, very different. The institutional risk is why they had to sign NDAs in the first place. Institutional risk will always trump, I hate that word now, will always overtake storytelling, losing all the words that I used to like, will always overtake truth-telling, and media consolidation. As the media giants get bigger and bigger, their risk appetite is less and less because their exposure is so much greater. There's an incredible article that Dana Harris wrote in IndieWire that debt is now the biggest gatekeeper of Hollywood because it's going to drive all of the decision making. And I think these pieces of infrastructure are the things that are now determining what kinds of information we get out all the way down to sometimes if we can tell literally our own experience to the world, which is so much of what my NDA is about. I'm curious, Hannah, as you're thinking about the life that you want this film to have afterwards, I want you to really take this opportunity in front of this audience to can you speak out loud your biggest dream for what happens with this film? Because then all of you have to help make it happen, is what's about to happen here. So we're about to enter into a contractual obligation. Speak out loud, what do you want to happen for this movie?
I will answer, and I'd also love for Ashley and Ifoma to answer the question, because I'd be very curious about where we overlap and where they have ideas that I haven't thought of yet. And I want to start by saying something about trust in the process. We talk a lot about respect being earned. We don't talk as much about trust being earned. I think that this process, I hope it didn't include me saying trust me, just because I felt like there was trust between us. I think it was this kind of process of her getting a feel for me in this other way, because we were friends, sure, but we didn't set out to make a movie together, And I imagine that might have been true for you with Julie and Miriam, as well as your people on this film, that you sort of start to trust and then you reset each time there's a new factor. So I just want to say that about trust. I do think it's an ongoing process and it has to be maintained. The global answer is I want this film to get out there because I think that people engage with people's stories when they feel honest and direct, and I think that we've made a very honest, direct film that includes participation by people on both sides of the camera, and that includes deep creative collaboration. I don't know in this moment what its platform is going to be. It feels critical to me that we engage community and that we engage in conversation around the movie, because I think that experiencing it as a viewer is going to be one thing, and then getting to be in a conversation with the people who are responsible for it is quite another, which is why it's so incredible to share a stage with you, because that's what you're doing. You're saying, who are the people who might benefit from seeing this, and how can we include them in what this has been, and pay it forward by doing that. And that's when I have been most affected by films. I think it can include a platform that allows for people to see it in silo, but it's going to need to have a parallel track of us being boots on the ground. And I think what's special about our film team and our directors is that that is how they move in the world. They want to be talking about it. Julie and Miriam, they really walk the talk in terms of getting educated and listening to people's kind of feedback and moving forward mindfully. So a slightly long-winded and obvious answer, which is get the movie in front of audiences and make ourselves available to talking with the people who want to talk to us about it. And I'm going to pass it to Ify for the impact, because there's a huge impact element.
Yeah, so after I worked on the legislation in California, a big project for me afterwards was making the case to shareholders of large corporations. And one of those large shareholders was BlackRock. And one of the conversations that I remember distinctly having with them is NDAs are not pro-corporate. And my argument for that, which may not seem obvious, is they are pro-executive, they're pro-individuals in the company who are engaging in wrongdoing, but they don't actually help shareholders, because shareholders are the ones who are paying massive lawsuits and settlements also when they're finding out about the wrongdoing, because shareholders at BlackRock and the shareholders of large companies like Apple and Alphabet and Meta are finding out in the Wall Street Journal and in the New York Times. That is not good for them. And so how that ties to distribution for me is I engaged in battle with Apple and with lawyers at Apple and with lawyers at Google and with lawyers at Meta. That, for me, is a worry, and my apologies to the filmmakers for the difficulty that may introduce in getting this on streamers. But a huge win for me would be that shareholder argument taking hold, that actually this is great for shareholders. This is not just a moral and ethical argument. It's not a feel-good argument. You need to be able to expose wrongdoing so that shareholders can continue to make money and invest in development and in research and not in lawsuits and not in settlements. And so for me, the win would be seeing it distributed by an Apple after they slammed me at the SEC and in front of state treasurers and fought me in California on the legislation and in Washington state and will continue to fight. I would love that. I welcome that. I welcome Apple's legal team to continue fighting this legislation while it's playing on Apple. That would be great.
Amen.
Yeah, Ashley, how about for you?
The only other thing that I would add to that, my goal, I wouldn't wish my experience upon anyone, genuinely. There's a lot of really uncomfortable things that I exposed, and it's hard for others to hear it, but those are the conversations that we have to have. And I just want the impact to be the one person who thought they were alone and saw this and realized that I've been there too, and we could get through this collectively all together as humans. That's really selfishly the impact, and I'm already seeing that happen. Each time I talk about it, I have people come up to me after the film, and for me, that was the reason I'm doing it, and that will continue to be what I hope happens. More conversations, more people realizing that they're not alone, and here to to speak out for all those who can't. So,
Christy, when you are talking to films that have big ambitions around policy change, in addition to like wanting to get to wide audiences for the reach, would you give us sort of like your 2 to 5 minute, here's how I break down that kind of strategy? Because Christy has one of the sharpest minds for impact strategy I've ever, I made a documentary that came out on PBS last year called Ratified, and the Sundance before, I saw her for 10 minutes, and I said, I just want to, have a quick strategy session with you when you can. And she asked me 5 questions, at the end of which I was like, holy shit, okay, I kind of understand how to mobilize now. So can you just talk to us really quickly about, you start thinking about this, what are the questions you're asking? How do you help start to like knit this together?
Sure. So I think that the first question, and I'll speak more like, yes, impact film, but also just filmmakers a little bit broader. The first is just like, what is your intention of the film? And that's like, I think this one's very, very clear, it's impact. But the reason why it's important to be clear about what your goal is all your waterfall of decisions afterwards are gonna fall in line with that. So is your goal to make money? And that's not a bad goal. Like you may need to pay back investors. Is it to make impact? You really have some specific social change you wanna see in the world. Is it to advance your career, which is also very noble? Is it to get at film festivals and have people understand your work? Or is it just to find audience and have as many people see it? Because all those choices will fall in after that. And so for you guys, if it is impact, I love the Apple story, by the way. Like, let's get to Molly Thompson at Apple, like make her watch the movie. Like that might be it. That might be the route that makes the most impact, is getting that story out of it. It might not be. If impact, it's not having a distributor, because the distributor takes over the control of the marketing. And so it is just on a community level, or saying we're gonna get into every big corporation, their employee working groups are gonna host a screening of this film. And that is the route that we can have the most impact. And if it is like a financial, because you should be paid back for the time, then maybe it is seeking like a distribution deal. So that's like the main place to start. And then the second thing, if it is impact, you already have an amazing group of experts that are working on it. But we always say like work with the experts. Build a brain trust, or we'll sometimes call a heart trust, of people that you trust with your film and with the impact. These could be political experts, it could be community organizers, it could be nonprofits, but kind of build that brain trust early and those relationships early. So I guess like I'll kind of start there. Like those are the 2 things I would start with when thinking about building the impact campaign.
I think everybody should have a heart trust.
Heart trusts are
Just
great.
for life. Heart trust for life.
You get a text group. It's really it's really great.
Yes.
Get feedback immediately.
Yes. We have about 15 minutes left, and I don't know, am I allowed to ask if people want to ask questions? I could hand them my own microphone. No, I don't want to. Oh, no. They're like, what are you doing to me? You didn't tell me you were going to do this. Is that okay? Do you have questions for this incredible panel? Yes. Hold on. I think we need to get you a microphone because this is being recorded and we need to be able to hear you, and probably, hopefully, there is like subtitling that will happen.
Really incredible story. I look forward to the film. I am a lawyer, so I want to just ask kind of a broad question of, well, let me rephrase. I'm a lawyer, but I really promote ethical business, right? I believe capitalism is a force for good that has been overtaken by corporations that are lobbying our government to get special treatment, and I'm very much against that. I think there's a large conversation that doesn't happen a lot because there's a lot of political siding that occurs in these types of discussions. I'm interested to know, how do you see this playing for both sides of the aisle? And do you see a place for maybe people that are coming from a more capitalistic, corporatistic position where money is leading, maybe not the only factor, but is the leading factor? How do you see this playing out broadly to these audiences? And is there a way to bridge the gap to show the importance of putting people ahead of profit? Because as you mentioned, ultimately that makes them more money, fundamentally.
I love this question. I started out as a corporate hack. I worked at Google in DC, Facebook at headquarters in Menlo Park, and then Pinterest also at headquarters in San Francisco. Corporate lingo is my first nature. And so even in moving to the activism space, that was where my brain was, that I'm not going to have a feel-good conversation with policymakers in most spaces, Republicans and Democrats, independents as well, and certainly not with shareholders. The argument that has to be made is this is not a nice thing for you to do. This is the right thing for your bottom line, because as is evidenced, and the film goes into this a little bit, at Pinterest, after I and a number of other employees came forward, the company paid $25 million in a lawsuit, or in a settlement, to the former COO, who broke her NDA after she saw that lowly me and another employee had broken ours, and then another $50 million to Rhode Island shareholders who sued the company based on all of the disclosures that had been made, because as shareholders, they weren't made aware of it until it was public, and it had already cost the company millions of dollars. So there are direct financial amounts that you can tie to disclosures like this. With Fox, with name the company, it costs to not get rid of the individuals who are doing the illegal activity and who are engaging in misconduct, and keeping them over the company. So if there's any elevating a person over profit, it's these executives who are engaging in wrongdoing. And so that argument I have found to be salient. You don't need to talk about politics if you want to talk about the money. And then if you want to do good, like, that's great too. But honestly, this doesn't benefit anyone except for the individual who's breaking the law already.
I want to actually follow up on that. Can you just talk a little bit about, because you made legal infrastructure change in California and Washington, and I know it's second nature to you, but maybe not to everyone else in here. What were the steps, if you can sort of highlight them, from here is my personal story, here is me breaking my NDA, to nobody has NDAs anymore around this stuff? Like, can you just like walk us through what are the steps between here's my experience and here's policy change?
Yeah, I also want to clarify, NDAs are not the problem. It's the type of content that people are, or that individuals in these companies are trying to keep from being disclosed. That's the problem. You can have a non-disclosure agreement that has to do with intellectual property, with company trade secrets. That's fine. Discrimination, harassment, abuse, those are not trade secrets. And so they should not be covered by a non-disclosure agreement or a non-disparagement agreement. An argument that we made in California when we passed the Silence No More Act was because the Chamber of Commerce had it on their, what they formerly called a job killer list. The bills that they would try to kill, and the argument they would make to lawmakers is this bill, if it's passed into law, will prevent jobs. And they couldn't do that with this because we were so effective in making the case that if someone disparages a company, if they lie about something that took place, the company can sue them. You can be held responsible for telling lies. You should not be penalized for telling the truth. And so that's the argument that made sense to everyone who heard it. The chamber eventually pulled their opposition because there's a place for non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreements. It is just not with conduct that we've already determined is illegal.
Can I just say, like, you are so great talking about this. Obviously, this is your expertise. But when it comes to like the impact campaign and like the marketing, it's so hard for any film to break through the noise these days. But one of the things that's such a strength in just listening to you guys is like the specificity of your messaging and being able to hone that in like over and over and saying, if I can quote you a bit, it was like, it's not the NDA, it's the problem. It's being penalized for telling the truth. And if you get some of those lines down over and over and over again, like we can start to repeat them, and that's your campaign like ricocheting out from the theaters. So just you're an amazing speaker for it.
Yeah, that's what this panel is meant to be about, is what are the ways that the current infrastructure penalizes the truth or is more incentivized to squash it than to allow it to come forward. And it's also interesting to me that storytelling is also how we reverse those systems. That and Ifoma, did you say this in the movie or in the talk back after about rejecting the premise?
Yes.
Can you just say a little bit more about that? Because that's been swirling around for me all day, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is about to be a way of life for me. Can you just talk a little bit more about that? Because I think this is actually a really interesting piece of like internal infrastructure when we're thinking about putting together arguments that will work across aisles and stuff like that. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was born argumentative, I think. I've always had an issue with authority and have pushed back, but it wasn't until I was in college. One of my very favorite professors, I was a poli-sci major with a focus on computer science. And at the point when that wasn't really a thing, but I was really interested in the Fourth Amendment and privacy specifically in the tech context. So the third-party doctrine for all of the nerds out there. Once you share something with someone else, it's considered no longer private, but that means anything you put on a computer, anything you put on your phone. Anyway, this professor, who I loved, we would have discussions in class, and if someone asked a question, his first response would be to whoever was answering it, why are you answering it as it was phrased? You don't have to accept the premise of any question or any situation, even if it's stated authoritatively. You can reject it. And that thought, like that, I still get goosebumps even thinking about it. And I mentioned the phrase in the film, but that has been the basis for all of this. Yes, there's the non-disclosure agreement. Yes, there are all of these penalties that they can present me with, but I remember pushing back with my lawyer who, like, lawyers love accepting the premise. Oh my God, that is the profession, no offense. And I kept on pushing back with him. And finally he got it. I mean, rejecting the premise was what he had to take on board with accepting that his client was going to violate a contract that he had been party to. Like, it is very difficult for us because it's ingrained in culture, and as we grow up, to accept authority, accept the premise, and what we're all doing, what your entire business is rejecting the premise.
Yeah, and that's thank you for that phrase 2 days ago, because it helped me actually build the entire arc of how I wanted this panel to go. Is the place I kind of want us to land today is the ways in which really bold, brave storytelling is about rejecting the premise. And I, at Seed and Spark, work with filmmakers all the time who are bemoaning the state of the system. But I'm making this film, but how am I gonna get it to audiences? And it's like, well, yeah, of course the systems that have been built for only dominant culture stories to be told are not gonna work for your really cool screwball lesbian horror film. So this is not how it's gonna work, because the film itself rejects the premise. And how do we all activate our own agency when leveraging storytelling? And that is from telling a truth that seems too painful to tell, to filming something that feels too personal, to attacking a legal premise and getting your poor lawyer on board with it, to building actually new community infrastructure for storytelling to emerge. And so in our last 4 minutes, I'm curious if you have kind of a thought that you are sitting with or taking away from your experience here premiering this film. And it plays again tonight, right? Tomorrow.
Yeah, Monday.
Monday, oh, sorry.
And again Wednesday.
Wait, tell everybody when else the film plays. That's important.
It plays on Monday and Wednesday, and both at Alamo in the afternoon both days, and you can find it on my NDA on the South by Southwest website. I could quote all the times, but you won't remember, but that is where you can find them.
Thank you. So yeah, Hannah, what has this premiere experience have you really been thinking about?
I mean, maybe this is too unbelievably optimistic of me in a, everyone can say the refrain, over and over in a tricky landscape, but I really believe in audiences, and I really believe that it is our job as filmmakers not to put audiences aside, but to really front and center them. I think there are things that get in the way of connecting filmmakers and films from audiences, but I don't think that's the audience's fault. I believe in people wanting to engage with good work. And I guess I feel really confirmed in that with this movie making its way to South by and giving us an opportunity to talk to you all about it, because it is so unlikely, given all of the infrastructure that exists, that we could have made this movie in this way and gotten through, actually not even gotten through, I was gonna say gotten through the kind of legal process, but actually we did as a team. I wouldn't have had maybe the confidence to say we rejected the premise with the legal teams over and over, but to use Ifoma's language, we rejected the premise over and over with this film, and sometimes not all of us at the same time. Sometimes it would be Julie saying, what if, or Miriam saying, I don't feel good about that, or Elizabeth, totally upending the distribution model. And people got on board when we were smart about what we were saying and we were clear about what we wanted, to your point. And audiences are engaging. We've had one forum so far, but I think we can keep having those forums if we're smart about what we're saying our intention is, and if we're confident when we stand up to the people who tell us that it has to be a certain way. So the more concise version of that is I really believe that there are audiences for good films, and I believe that it is my job to figure out a route to them if other people are saying the route isn't obvious or it's something that doesn't feel right.
I love that. Thank you. Ashley, how about you?
Can you ask a question one more time?
Yes. Is there an idea or a feeling that you are sitting with now that this is, you've put your story out in the world a bunch of times, but this is a new way for you?
Honestly, I never thought that I would share my story. So the fact, and like I mentioned before, I only said I would do it if I got the opportunity to do so. So the fact that I'm here, part of this film is still incredibly so surreal for me, and I can't even believe that I'm part of this. But I'm so incredibly proud to be here, and I am just going to continue sharing my story and starting the conversation, and I think that's what this film does really well. It's a good starting point for conversations, and that's what ultimately being here is going to be, this I'm reinventing myself with this. This is the new version of me. This is where I am. This is my life now, and this is what I'm going to be doing moving forward. So
Amazing. Ifoma?
Oh my goodness, I've talked a lot. I am just excited to see what comes. Yeah, I think people really need to go and watch it. It is wonderful storytelling, and it is so thoughtfully put together.
Yeah. And Christy, what's your sort of big idea right now?
I don't have. Actually, can I swap that out and say, because I got to ask everybody, like, what is your wish for this film? And I've been sitting here going, I have a big wish for this film, because I think you guys were so, again, brave in putting it together and brave in taking on the financial risk of telling this story. And I'm really looking forward to seeing your stories, because you're an incredible storyteller on this stage. And that's really for audiences to continue to seek out this film and support this film and endorse this film. What I mean by that is we get so used to our phones telling us things. Your algorithm is pushing stories towards you. You open up an app and you pick what's on the home screen. Sometimes we have to fight just like a little bit harder to seek out these great films. And so, and even small things like an Instagram follow or signing up for an email or reposting something, that actually helps them put together a kit when they're pitching distributors of like, look, we already have an audience here. So my ask is, my wish is for the audiences to follow you guys.
Thank you. Thank you so much to this incredible panel. Thank you so much to our wonderful audience. Thank you so much to Public House, to Siegel Family Endowment. Please go see My NDNA and My NDA. And before you leave here today, my wish is for you to find somebody you don't yet know and tell them a truth about your impression of this, about your experience here. Let this not be just another networking moment of trying to present your best self. Like, what if we find somebody we don't know and make a little space for them to be human? So please try not to leave, challenge yourself not to leave here without doing that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you, Emily.